People often think they can size someone up in a glance, that a quick look at a wheelchair, a limp, or any visible sign of disability tells the whole story. They see what they expect to see and immediately make assumptions. In that moment, the person in front of them is reduced to a single characteristic, a single label, and all the nuances of who they are, what they've endured, and what they are capable of vanish. It's a kind of casual cruelty, not always intentional, but no less damaging. Underestimation is subtle. It creeps in when someone assumes weakness because someone uses a wheelchair. It whispers when people lower their expectations without giving the person a chance to speak for themselves. It is in the sidelong glances, the hesitation to include someone in a conversation, the unspoken rule that the disabled person should know their place in society. This is what makes underestimation so insidious. It doesn't announce itself with a shout. It doesn't wear a sign. It is woven into ordinary moments, in workplaces, in public spaces, even among friends and family. When a person enters a room and others immediately treat them as if they are fragile, incapable, or somehow less than, it chips away at confidence. It doesn't matter how much training they have, how much courage they carry, or how much they have achieved. The world often filters them through a narrow lens. In some ways, it is a test, though an unasked one, of patience, self-control, and resilience. The problem is not just that the judgment exists. The real danger is that people act on it. Doors that could open remain closed. Opportunities are denied, not because the person isn't qualified or capable, but because others have already written the story in their mind. People in wheelchairs are often spoken to in a patronizing tone, offered help they did not ask for, or ignored entirely in decision-making situations. Every small act of assumption reinforces a stereotype, reinforcing the idea that being disabled is synonymous with being incapable. This is a form of societal underestimation that shapes the experiences of millions every day. Underestimation also feeds on invisibility. It thrives in environments where achievements are unseen or overlooked because of bias. Consider someone who has undergone intense military training, has faced extreme physical and mental challenges, and has completed missions most people couldn't imagine. To a casual observer, a wheelchair may obscure all of that. The visible marker of disability overshadows invisible strength, training, skill, and courage. People don't see what the eyes cannot easily measure. They don't see the countless hours of preparation, the endurance tests, the discipline that shapes someone's character. They see only what is immediately visible and decide, wrongly, that it defines the whole. And yet, there is a perverse logic to underestimation. People feel comfortable when they think they understand someone. They want neat categories, predictable patterns, easy assessments. A person in a wheelchair fits into an assumed category. Someone who is vulnerable, someone who needs assistance, someone whose abilities are limited. It is comforting to believe that life can be simplified into such assumptions, even if those assumptions are false. But that comfort comes at a cost, both to the person being underestimated and to those doing the underestimating. They miss the truth, the complexity, the depth, and, ultimately, the human potential before them. Underestimation also carries a psychological weight for those on the receiving end. Every time someone assumes they are weaker, slower, or less capable, it adds to a long history of being dismissed or marginalized. For some, it can be internalized, creating doubt, frustration, or anger. For others, it can fuel determination, becoming a source of motivation to prove people wrong. But regardless of the response, the effect is profound. To be consistently underestimated is to be seen through a lens that flattens identity and erases achievement. And it is something that shapes every encounter, every judgment, and every opportunity, or lack thereof. What's remarkable, though, is how often underestimation is defied. People who are judged prematurely, written off because of a disability or perceived weakness, often carry a depth of skill, resilience, and courage that the world cannot imagine. They move forward, achieve, and exceed expectations, not just for themselves, but in ways that challenge everyone around them to reconsider their assumptions. And in that tension, the moment between underestimation and the reveal of true capability. There is a powerful lesson about human perception, bias, and the courage it takes to be underestimated and still rise above it. Injustice often wears a quiet face. It doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures or obvious cruelty. It slips into ordinary situations, disguised as rules, policies, or social norms, and the moment it touches someone's life, it can feel both bewildering and humiliating. For the woman in the wheelchair, injustice came in the form of a simple demand: leave. No explanation beyond the perception that she didn't belong. No consideration of who she was, what she had endured, or what she had achieved. She was in a public space, simply living her life, and yet she was judged and removed because someone else assumed they had the authority to decide her worthiness. The arbitrariness of that decision is part of what makes injustice so sharp, so deeply cutting. It's the knowledge that the rules, the authority, and the people in charge can, in a single moment, wield power over someone's dignity without cause. Injustice often reveals itself most clearly in the absence of accountability. Those who enforced the decision felt no obligation to check their assumptions, no reason to consider the reality beyond what they saw. The system, or the social structure, was on their side, making it easy to overlook fairness in favor of convenience or comfort. Injustice is rarely about individual cruelty alone. It is often about the structures and attitudes that make cruelty acceptable or even invisible. When someone is removed from a space, not because of what they did, but because of who they are perceived to be, it demonstrates a broader failure of empathy, understanding, and basic human decency. The emotional weight of being wronged in this way is heavy. There is the immediate sting of rejection, the confusion over why someone would treat you as if you were less than, and the simmering anger at the blatant unfairness of it all. But injustice doesn't stop at the personal level. It has social implications. When one person is removed unjustly, it sends a signal to others, both to those who are marginalized and to those who enforce the rules, that society condones judgment without inquiry, that appearances are more important than truth, and that conformity matters more than capability. In this way, the injustice experienced by a single person can ripple outward, shaping behavior, expectations, and the unspoken rules of the environment. Injustice is also deeply tied to assumptions about identity and ability. The moment someone judged her, they were not only assessing her presence, but also her potential to contribute, to engage, to participate. They decided that her wheelchair defined her, that it marked her as someone unfit for that space. The irony of injustice is that it often punishes precisely the qualities or circumstances that society misunderstands. Physical disability, for instance, is assumed to correlate with weakness, dependence, or incompetence, and when that assumption drives action, it creates a clear, painful unfairness. The person subjected to this treatment experiences not just exclusion, but a negation of their humanity, a refusal to see the full picture of who they are. Injustice also has a way of exposing society's discomfort with difference. It arises when people encounter what they cannot immediately categorize, what challenges their sense of normalcy, or what requires them to confront their biases. The woman in the wheelchair became a focal point for that discomfort. Her presence alone highlighted assumptions about who belongs, who has authority, and who deserves respect. And when the decision was made to remove her, it was a way of restoring the comfort of familiarity for others at her expense. Injustice, in this sense, is as much about the insecurities and limitations of those enforcing it as it is about the person being wronged. Experiencing injustice often forces a person to confront not just external barriers, but internal questions as well. Was this my fault? Did I do something wrong? Could I have prevented it? The answers are usually clear. The fault lies entirely with those who judged, those who wielded authority without insight or fairness. Yet even knowing this does little to mitigate the sting. Injustice leaves a mark because it challenges the fundamental expectation that society should operate on principles of fairness and respect. When those principles are violated, even temporarily, It shakes one's sense of security and highlights the precariousness of belonging. Injustice can also serve as a mirror. It reflects the biases, assumptions, and shortcomings of those in power. It exposes how quickly people can act against someone simply for being different, without understanding, without empathy, and without questioning their own authority. It forces a confrontation with uncomfortable truths about society, truths about inequality, prejudice, and the arbitrary application of rules. And while experiencing it is painful, witnessing it can be a powerful reminder of the importance of challenging assumptions, speaking out, and refusing to accept unfair treatment as inevitable. Revelation can hit like a shockwave, sudden and impossible to ignore. It is the moment when assumptions crumble, when preconceptions are exposed as incomplete or completely wrong, and when the truth of someone's identity or capability bursts through the surface of casual judgment. For the woman in the wheelchair, revelation was not just about correcting a misunderstanding. It was about shattering the illusion that people had built around her. The crowd, the staff, anyone who had seen her only as a disabled person, suddenly had to confront a truth they never anticipated. She was a Navy SEAL. The title alone carries weight, authority, and respect, but in that moment, it also served as a mirror reflecting their own assumptions back at them. What they thought they knew was nothing compared to the reality before their eyes. Revelation forces people to reevaluate everything they thought they understood. When they learned who she really was, every glance, every judgment, every action they had taken in her presence gained a new, stark significance. The simple act of sitting in a wheelchair, which had caused them to assume weakness, was suddenly seen in an entirely new context. It was no longer a marker of limitation. It was a layer of complexity that had nothing to do with her capability, skill, or courage. This kind of revelation is humbling because it reminds us how easily we misjudge based on surface appearances. It exposes the human tendency to rely on shortcuts, to categorize others before truly understanding them. The power of revelation is amplified by contrast. In her case, the contrast between the assumptions made by others and the reality of her identity was extreme. They had assumed vulnerability, passivity, dependence. The reality was discipline, strength, experience, and courage forged through some of the most demanding training in the world. This contrast is what makes revelation so jarring. It is not just the truth that surprises, but the depth of the mistake in judgment. People are forced to reconcile two conflicting realities, the one they imagined and the one that exists. This reconciliation is rarely easy because it challenges ego, self-perception, and the comfortable narratives people construct to navigate the world. Revelation can also trigger a range of emotions, both in the person being revealed and in those witnessing it. For the woman in the wheelchair, the moment of revelation might have been satisfying, vindicating, and quietly powerful. It is the satisfaction of knowing that what they saw was only a fraction of who she is. For those who witnessed it, the emotional response is often more complicated. Shock, guilt, embarrassment, and awe can intermingle. People may feel exposed for their assumptions, humiliated for judging prematurely, and suddenly aware of how much they have underestimated someone's capabilities. This emotional turbulence underscores the profound impact that revelation can have, not just in clarifying truth, but in reshaping perception. Revelation is not always instantaneous. It can unfold gradually. In some cases, people begin to realize the depth of someone's abilities over time through observation and interaction. In her case, though, it was abrupt, undeniable, and public. A revelation of this magnitude changes the dynamic entirely. It can silence criticism, demand respect, and force reconsideration. It disrupts expectations and reshapes social hierarchies. Suddenly, the person who is underestimated holds the authority of knowledge, experience, and accomplishment, while those who assumed superiority are confronted with the limits of their judgment. At its core, revelation is transformative because it illuminates hidden truths. It exposes qualities, histories, and achievements that might not be immediately visible, reminding everyone that identity is never reducible to a single attribute. In this story, her wheelchair was only a part of her life, not the defining element. The revelation of her status as a Navy SEAL revealed the depth of her training, the courage she had cultivated, and the resilience she had embodied in ways that no one had guessed. Revelation, in this sense, is not just about surprise. It is about recognition, about seeing someone fully and being forced to acknowledge what is real rather than what was assumed. Revelation also carries an element of accountability. Once the truth is known, there is no longer room for dismissal or casual judgment. Those who misjudged her must confront the reality of their error and reconsider their behavior, consciously or unconsciously. It is a moment of reckoning, one that can leave a lasting impression on those involved. The lesson embedded in such a revelation extends beyond the immediate situation. It is a reminder of the dangers of assumptions, the limits of perception, and the depth of human potential that can exist beneath surfaces that seem familiar or ordinary. Resilience is often misunderstood as something visible, a quality that can be measured by outward appearances or immediate responses. People expect to see grit in a clenched jaw, determination in a sprint, or courage in a loud declaration. Yet true resilience is far subtler, more enduring, and more complex than what the eye can detect. It is the quiet persistence that carries someone forward despite repeated obstacles, the inner strength that refuses to be defined by circumstance, and the capacity to rise again after being knocked down, again and again. For the woman in the wheelchair, resilience was not a performance for the world to see. It was a lifelong commitment to enduring, to surviving, and to excelling, often in ways that no one around her could imagine. Resilience is tested in moments of adversity, especially when the challenge is compounded by external judgment. Being underestimated, ignored, or dismissed is not just frustrating, it is emotionally taxing. Every time someone assumes limitation, every time access is denied or opportunity withheld, the weight of misunderstanding presses down. Yet resilience is the ability to carry that weight without surrendering, to maintain focus on goals and values despite the barriers erected by others. It is the ability to walk into a room where others have already decided you don't belong and continue to assert your presence, silently demanding recognition for who you are, not for what people think you are. Resilience is also about adaptability. The world rarely accommodates those who are different, and the people who succeed are often those who learn to navigate constraints creatively. For someone with a disability, resilience means finding ways to participate fully in life, to achieve at levels that surpass what others expect, and to refuse to let circumstance dictate self-worth. It is about mastering the tools, techniques, and mindset needed to thrive in environments that are not designed for you, and doing so with confidence and dignity. In her case, resilience was a combination of physical skill, mental discipline, and emotional fortitude, honed over years of rigorous training and life experience that could not be judged by appearance alone. Resilience also includes an element of patience. It is not a momentary burst of courage, but a sustained practice of perseverance. It involves enduring repeated challenges without letting frustration or despair take hold, and it often requires a level of self-control that is invisible to observers. While people around her might have assumed weakness or dependence because she was in a wheelchair, her resilience was evident in the quiet way she carried herself, in her confidence, in the calm precision of her actions, and in her unwavering commitment to her own standards of excellence. This kind of resilience is unglamorous but powerful, a steady force that shapes outcomes over time. Another facet of resilience is the ability to transform adversity into growth. Challenges, setbacks, and moments of exclusion do not only test resilience, they strengthen it. Each obstacle becomes a lesson, each moment of underestimation an opportunity to prove not only competence but character. For the woman in the wheelchair, resilience was not just about enduring injustice. It was about taking those experiences and using them to reinforce her own identity, her confidence, and her determination. Every barrier, every dismissive glance, and every denial of access became part of the proof that she was capable of far more than people imagined. Resilience is also a source of inspiration, even when it is not deliberately performed for others. When someone stands firm in the face of unfair treatment, when they move forward despite prejudice, it sends a subtle but powerful message to those who witness it. Strength is not always obvious, and courage can take many forms. It challenges assumptions and reshapes perceptions, often without a word being spoken. In her case, her resilience would eventually be recognized when her true identity was revealed, but even before that moment, it had already shaped her path, enabling her to navigate the world with purpose and determination. Finally, resilience is deeply tied to identity and self-respect. It is not simply about surviving or enduring hardship. It is about asserting one's right to exist fully and authentically, regardless of how others perceive you. It is about refusing to be defined by limitations imposed externally, and instead defining yourself by your own capabilities, values, and achievements. For someone who has trained to become a Navy SEAL, resilience is not optional. It is embedded in every decision, every action, every day of preparation and endurance. The woman in the wheelchair exemplified this, showing that true resilience transcends circumstance and remains a constant, unyielding force within the individual. Shock is a powerful reaction because it disrupts expectation, forcing people to confront something they did not anticipate and cannot immediately categorize. In the case of the woman in the wheelchair, the shock was immediate and visceral. People who had assumed weakness, dependence, or vulnerability were suddenly confronted with a reality that contradicted every judgment they had made. The revelation that she was a Navy SEAL, a role that demands physical endurance, mental toughness, and courage under pressure, was not just surprising, it was disorienting. It unsettled the mental frameworks that people rely on to navigate the world and compelled them to reassess their assumptions, often in real time. Shock, in this context, serves as a mirror to the errors of perception that occur when appearances are taken at face value. Shock can also be deeply uncomfortable. It creates tension because it forces an immediate reckoning. Those who had dismissed her, judged her, or excluded her suddenly became aware of their own misjudgment. There is a moment of recognition, brief but intense, when people realize that they have underestimated someone who possesses extraordinary capability. That realization can be accompanied by embarrassment, guilt, or even disbelief. These emotions are part of the cognitive dissonance that occurs when long-held assumptions collide with undeniable truth. The intensity of the shock is magnified by the fact that it is not just about ability. It is about authority, courage, and identity, qualities that cannot be faked and cannot be overlooked once revealed. Respect often follows shock, but it is a respect born from recognition rather than obligation. In this case, the respect was immediate because the magnitude of her achievement and her personal history could not be ignored. People who had assumed they understood her were suddenly confronted with the reality of her experience, training, and discipline. Respect, in this sense, is not earned through words or social niceties. It is demanded by evidence and character. When someone who has been underestimated demonstrates exceptional capability, the reaction from others evolves from surprise to admiration. There is an acknowledgement of skill, courage, and resilience that commands attention and alters social dynamics in an instant. Shock and respect are often intertwined. One cannot fully respect without first being shocked, and one cannot be truly shocked without confronting the limits of prior understanding. In the moment when her true identity was revealed, the crowd or those who had judged her were likely experiencing both simultaneously. The shock of realizing how wrong they were, and the respect that follows the undeniable demonstration of her ability and character. This dual reaction highlights how powerful perception can be when it is corrected by truth. It also underscores the human tendency to misjudge based on limited information, and how quickly those misjudgments can be reversed when confronted with reality. Shock can also catalyze self-reflection. When someone witnesses another person exceed expectations in such a striking way, it forces them to examine their own biases, assumptions, and judgments. They may ask themselves why they made the assumptions they did, how often they rely on superficial cues, and how frequently they have underestimated others in ways that have gone unchallenged. In this sense, shock is not only a reaction to external events, but also a prompt for internal examination. It is a moment that reveals both the limitations of perception and the potential for growth in understanding and empathy. Respect, when combined with shock, can create a lasting impression. It is not merely a polite acknowledgement. It is a recognition of accomplishment, courage, and character. Those who experience this combination often carry it forward, remembering the moment as a lesson in humility and awareness. Witnessing someone who has been underestimated rise to reveal their true capabilities can redefine what people consider possible, altering their expectations in future encounters. This kind of respect is transformative because it changes the way people engage with others, challenging preconceptions and encouraging a deeper appreciation for individual complexity. Shock and respect together also highlight the social consequences of underestimation. They expose the errors in judgment that can lead to exclusion or marginalization and demonstrate the corrective power of truth. When someone reveals an unexpected identity or capability, it not only validates the individual, but also forces the broader social group to confront its assumptions, biases, and limitations. The experience becomes a shared lesson, illustrating that appearances are not a reliable measure of potential, and that respect must ultimately be grounded in reality rather than assumption. Finally, this interplay between shock and respect reveals the tension between perception and reality. It demonstrates that human judgment is fallible, often guided by incomplete information or unconscious bias, and that true recognition comes only when evidence demands it. When a person underestimated and excluded commands admiration through their actions or identity, it forces a reevaluation of both individual and collective attitudes, creating a moment that is memorable, humbling, and instructive. Lessons are often most powerful when they arrive unexpectedly, disguised within events that first provoke shock, anger, or disbelief. The lesson in this story is not presented gently. It is learned through confrontation with one's own assumptions and biases. People thought they understood the situation. They believed that appearances dictated ability, that a wheelchair automatically meant vulnerability, that someone who looked different could not possibly embody the qualities of strength, discipline, and courage. They acted on those assumptions, enforcing rules or making judgments without considering the truth beneath the surface. And it was only when that truth was revealed that the lesson became undeniable. Judging someone based on what is visible is not only unfair, it is profoundly limiting. Lessons learned in such circumstances are multifaceted. On the simplest level, the immediate takeaway is clear: do not underestimate others. The woman in the wheelchair defied the assumptions of everyone who saw her, demonstrating that capability and strength exist in forms that may not be immediately visible. People often rely on shortcuts to assess others, drawing conclusions based on appearances, circumstances, or social stereotypes. The lesson here challenges that reliance, emphasizing the importance of withholding judgment until the full picture can be understood. It is a reminder that every individual carries a depth of experience and skill that may not be obvious at first glance, and that true understanding requires attention, curiosity, and humility. The lesson also extends into the realm of respect and empathy. When assumptions are proven wrong, those who misjudged another are forced to confront the consequences of their perception. This confrontation can be uncomfortable, but it is instructive. It highlights the ways in which casual dismissal or exclusion can harm others, not only emotionally, but socially and professionally. Empathy is developed when people recognize the experiences of others and appreciate their struggles and accomplishments, especially when those struggles are hidden beneath appearances. Respect, therefore, is not simply a matter of politeness. It becomes a deliberate choice, informed by understanding rather than assumption, and reinforced by the consequences of prior errors in judgment. Lessons of this nature also reveal the fragility of societal assumptions. Systems, rules, and social norms often operate under unexamined ideas about who belongs, who deserves recognition, and who is capable of achieving excellence. When someone breaks the mold, whether through exceptional ability, courage, or resilience, they expose the limitations of those assumptions. The lesson learned is not only personal for those who misjudged, but also collective, showing society that rigid expectations can obscure the truth and prevent recognition of talent, accomplishment, and potential. It forces reflection on broader questions of fairness, inclusion, and the danger of letting superficial indicators define opportunity. Another aspect of the lesson involves humility. Witnessing someone defy expectations teaches that no one can accurately assess the entirety of another person's capabilities without knowledge and context. Humility is born from the realization that assumptions can be misleading, and that recognition should follow observation and understanding rather than preconception. It is a lesson in patience and awareness, emphasizing that competence, courage, and determination often exist beneath surfaces that society might overlook. In this sense, the lesson learned is not just about how others are perceived. It is also about how to approach life with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to revise one's judgments. The lesson extends to the person who is underestimated as well. There is power in demonstrating capability and maintaining dignity in the face of doubt or exclusion. When others attempt to define someone by limitations or appearances, responding with composure, competence, and quiet authority not only validates the individual's identity, but also teaches a broader lesson to the world about strength, resilience, and the human spirit. It underscores the idea that lessons are reciprocal. While those who misjudge learn humility, those who are misjudged reinforce the value of persistence, self-respect, and excellence. Finally, the lesson encompasses the enduring impact of revelation on perception. Once assumptions are challenged and proven false, they cannot easily be reinstated. People remember moments when their judgments were upended, and those moments often change future interactions. The lesson learned is therefore long-lasting. Appearances can be deceiving, assumptions are fallible, and respect should be grounded in reality rather than stereotype. It is a reminder that understanding requires observation, empathy, and recognition of the full complexity of individuals, and that failing to do so comes at the cost of fairness, accuracy, and human connection.